When friends of Dee Dee Blanchard saw a sick message online about her being slashed and her daughter Gypsy Rose being assaulted, they were concerned enough to ask the police to go to the house and check up on them. It was a routine request and one the police were happy to do. Dee Dee was something of a local legend thanks to her selfless ways she cared for terminally ill daughter Gypsy Rose, but when they reached the house on 14 June 2015 it was completely dark. If it had not have been for the car in the driveway, as Gypsy was wheelchair-bound and her mother wouldn't have been able to take her out without it, they decided to obtain a warrant to enter the home. While they waited for that, it was already too late. The person inside had been dead for days and was beyond any help. Dee Dee was dead. She had been murdered in an attack and had been stabbed multiple times and blows to the head, back and neck. Gypsy Rose was nowhere to be found in the home. She had gone missing. Gypsy at the time was 23 years old, but she looked 15 years old as her body had been ravaged by many illnesses and also had suffered from developmental issues. She could have possibly fought off the attacker. Police would launch a search for Gypsy Rose but could not predict what they were about to find out. When Dee Dee was 24 years old, she would meet Rod Blanchard, 17 years old. He worked on a shrimp boat, and on a night out they began seeing each other, and within a few months Dee Dee became pregnant. Although Rod was reluctant to commit, he knew he had to step up, but Rod was not ready for such a responsibility. When he turned 18 years old, he left Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose. When Gypsy Rose was born, Rod did try to play a role in her life, but things were not easy. From the age of 3 months, Dee Dee began to notice some things wrong with Gypsy's health. She suffered from sleep apnea and digestive issues and seizures, and things got worse. Gypsy Rose at age 7 was involved in a bike accident and hurt her knee. Dee Dee believed Gypsy Rose was suffering from muscular dystrophy, a rapid muscle loss condition, and Gypsy Rose would end up in a wheelchair. Further along, Gypsy was diagnosed with leukemia. She was dying and with no option but to stop working to care for Gypsy Rose full-time. Dee Dee relied on the support from Rod and the kindness of strangers to keep things afloat at home. If Gypsy had been well, they may have still been struggling, but this was not the case, as the reality was that Gypsy Rose was not ill at all. Before Dee Dee has started to poisoning her own daughter with medication she didn't need and forcing her to undergo surgeries she did not require, as it turned out to be Dee Dee that was not well. Dee Dee was suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychological disorder that meant she was causing her daughter to seem ill in order to gain sympathy and money from those around her. With her knowledge as a nurse's aide, Dee Dee was able to fabricate symptoms that had real doctors believing in what she was saying about her daughter's symptoms and that Gypsy was actually sick. Gypsy Rose was not in school and was very isolated, and if anyone became suspicious they would move house. Dee Dee had become such an accomplished liar. Gypsy Rose was as frail as a bird and always in her wheelchair and being fed through a tube. She was such a sickly child. By the time Gypsy Rose was 15 years old, she had started to rebel against her mother. Gypsy Rose would speak to a neighbor about how different she seemed to be to everyone else. Gypsy Rose would search her home and would find a document claiming she was 19 years old, not 15 years old. Gypsy was very confused and planned to escape and run away, but Dee Dee tracked her down and brought her back home. As a punishment, Dee Dee used a dog lead and handcuffs to tie Gypsy to her bed for 2 weeks. Gypsy Rose wanted to get away and would start to come up with another plan. This time she would escape. She would start going on Christian dating websites, and it was here in 2012 she would meet a guy called Nicholas Godejohn. He was 23 years old. They communicated for 3 years online and would eventually meet in 2015, but Gypsy Rose was not attracted to him, although they did have sex. He was her way out of her current life and she wanted to leave her mother for good. The relationship between Nicholas and Gypsy Rose was a dark one. It was a master-slave relationship. Even stranger was he had multiple personalities, one being of a 500-year-old vampire called Victor. Gypsy Rose said that Nicholas encouraged her to kill her mother, and on the 14th of June that became a reality. Gypsy would text Nicholas when her mother had gone to sleep and would let him into the home and had everything waiting for him. He was dressed in dark clothes and he would take a knife with him. Gypsy would hide in the bathroom as Nicholas went upstairs. Then all of a sudden loud screams were heard and the name Gypsy was called out multiple times. Then it went silent. They then had sex and got changed and got ready to leave the home. They packed some stuff and got into a cab. The pair fled to Wisconsin, leading police to believe that Gypsy had been kidnapped as she was meant to be wheelchair-bound. Guilt was eating away at Gypsy over the death of her mother. She wanted her mother's body to be found, so she posted a message on Facebook hoping it would be so shocking the police would go to the house to check on things. Police would trace the IP address of the message and would arrive at the door of Nicholas's house, where the couple would surrender to police. They were both arrested and charged with murder, because of the many years of abuse Gypsy Rose had suffered and the effect it would have had on her. Prosecutors went lightly on her. In July 2015, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to the minimum term of 10 years. Nicholas Gojon, however, was found guilty of first-degree murder and would be sentenced to life in prison without parole. In September 2023, Gypsy Rose was released after serving just 8 years. Shish moved lives in Louisiana with her husband Ryan Anderson.